This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning, Michael. So some of you may have first been exposed to Flow via our TikTok, and Michael DiBenigno, who just joined in, is the master of TikTok. And let me just describe just a moment, give you a sense of like the community here at Flow. So we have a group of certified Flow designers, of which several are on the call today. One of them is Martine, and Martine created a flow of Messi's goals just before the World Cup. And that flow, getting some nods from Scott there, that flow, Michael put on TikTok, and it's over 9 million views there on TikTok, and of course has brought a lot of people to Flow, which is very exciting, but it's a great piece all by itself. So congratulations to Martin and Michael for putting that together. Michael, do you want to say
hi? Sure. Hey, everybody. Just getting up, so I'm not on video here, but wanted to jump in.
Okay. So first, I'm just going to check that you guys. Does my screen look pretty crisp, or is it fuzzy? It really depends on how my internet is working today.
For me.
Okay, great. And Spotlight. So first of all, like I said, we're building a mental model about how to build a flow and how to get around the editor. So you've already seen this same flow on Augmented Reality a moment ago. And here's what it looks like on a flat screen, on a desktop. We've got the advanced buttons down here in the corner, the bottom. You can click and drag. You can zoom in with your scroll bar or pinch and zoom if you're on a touchpad. And on the side here are a variety of options. Sometimes there's audio, so you can turn the audio on off, go full screen. But also, this is where a lot of the juicy stuff is. You can jump right into the editor. You can share the flow. I'll just pop this up, in fact. Okay, this one has not been shared publicly yet, but I can go and do that. Once you share it publicly, you can actually, anybody can just point their phone at the QR code and get to it. And let me move my face a little bit. There we go. As well as we have a public discovery area. So we can talk about that in a moment. But the main thing we're going to talk about, want to get into, is the Flow editor. And I'm just going to launch that up. So obviously you can swap back and forth between present and editor mode instantaneously. Of course, you're not going to be able to edit the flow if you don't have edit privileges. And so there's plenty of security around that. Now that we're in the editor, first of all, let's talk about the main areas of the app. There's the timeline. Remember, you saw 3 steps. In this case, each of those steps is its own swarm, and you can select a swarm by either clicking on the text or clicking on the cell. And on the right-hand side is the ability to edit that swarm. Again, we're going to go through this in more detail, but right off the bat, here, let me actually simplify this. Right off the bat, you can see that there's a bunch of different categories of attributes that you can edit. And sometimes we think, oh, there's so many buttons and checkboxes, but then we need them all. We use this tool every day to build flows, or so this is not, we know what we need in order to meet customers' expectations, and therefore we provide all of that to you as well. When you first come into Flow, chances are it will be set into the simple UI mode, and you can see that there's just a few less options on some of these screens. Pretty quick, you'll probably want to switch into advanced UI, but that's just because that's just going to show you all of the options. It really depends on where you are in your Flow journey. You can see that each one of these collapsible sections, we call them, shows a set of options. And here, for example, you can see exactly what the type of chart, it's called a scatter plot. That's the most common form. In fact, when you actually think about it, a flow, all of our flows are built out of swarms, and swarms are nothing but a series of dots in space. So that's the first term you kind of got to know about flow. Is a swarm is our own made up term, and we made it up so that you won't be confused. If we called it a chart, you might think it was something else, like, have preconceptions of what it might be. So it is, a swarm is a way to put dots in space. Those dots can animate from step to step, but that's essentially a swarm. For example, these dots are on 3 axes. We can maybe they'll turn off one just to clarify. So now we only have the width and height axis. In fact, just for example, we can turn on only one axis. And in that case, it just shows that there's data on every year from 1880 to 2022. The height axis is the temperature anomaly, which is how different, what is this temperature from the norm being 0, as defined by the average temperature between 1900 and 1980. But that has to do with the data. And then the depth axis is, take a category. There's land temperatures and sea temperatures. But it's pretty hard just to see these dots without additional stuff. So that's where, if I double click on this connections, now I've connected all those lines. So what's a connection and how does that work? I'm going to go back into more detail. Remember, I'm going to keep going from big picture to littler detail. So don't worry, I'm going to come back to this, but you can understand that there's something called components. And components are things like the connections, the lines that connect up the dots, and area charts. My area chart is invisible. If I double click on it, now I've got the area chart in here as well. So that starts to give you a sense of how these things are built. There's also labels and legends, and we will come back and talk through those. So now that you see that you've got swarms, it's the first word you need to really get in your mind. You've got components, which you can see here and create new ones. Then the next thing to understand is you have steps. So think of a step as a PowerPoint slide, or maybe a keyframe in an animation system. And that's how you move data from step to step and tell a story. Well, again, I'm going to come back and actually add steps and build this out for you in a moment. In addition to the chart, which essentially gives you the width, height, depth, the basic problem. Oh, let me show you a little bit more on that. So right now on the height axis, you can see we're using the temperature anomaly. This is the pull down, which shows the columns from your data set. So another column is a smoothed out. It's called lowest smoothing. It just happens to be a column in this data set to give you the trend, overall trend, instead of every year's data one by one. But data, right? Here we have, you can see a list of columns, but maybe you want to actually understand what's going on with the data. Of course, you don't have it in flow. Actually, you need data. And if you we can talk about ways to get good data from public sources. Of course, a lot of our enterprise customers already have data to work with. So this is the manage data panel. You can find it right up here. In the manage data panel, first thing it's going to do is it's going to pop up a data preview of whatever swarm you currently have selected and the data that's being used in that swarm. You can also take a look at all of the data that is present in this flow, which is what we're creating, this step-by-step data story. And you can see which data is used on which swarms. You can click on any one to get the data preview of it. There's data transformations, which we're a little bit more advanced topic, which we're not going to go too much here, and data upload. And you're going to use this one a lot because this is how you get your data in. I'm going to come back to that. We'll talk about CSVs and Google Sheets and things, but just as I say, we're building this mental model where you understand that you got data. You edit the flow in a variety of ways. You can also create a story which is where you would add narration. You can actually record your audio directly in. You can also add text on top of the flow, a little step over with overlay text. So I'm just going to say this is some overlay text and apply. And now you get to see text appearing at the top of the screen. You have some control over fonts and things like that as well. So you can build this story, and then you can present the flow, and you can share the flow. Okay, so now you kind of get the overall structure of how this is built. I think what I'd like to do, I'm going to take some questions, but then I'm going to start from a totally brand new flow and just walk you through how to create something like this step by step. Any questions on the terms and kind of the big picture here, from seeing in augmented reality all the way through the general organization of the flow editor?
I think this is great. I was going to ask, obviously, I'm sure you're getting around to it here, but I was seeing how you're using AR to impose it on top of the desk there. Is that inside of the create story, is being able to record your real-time, what your your pass-through camera is taking while the animation is proceeding? Is that inside of the present flow or the create story tab?
Sure. So actually, it's on the phone. You only have present mode. You can't do editing and create story. So you just have the one option, and the actual capture is just using a screen capture tool. So we keep experimenting, but we just haven't gotten a really good, reliable way to do a screen capture within our app from within the browser at the same time that our app is running. But you can use any typical Android or iPhone screen capture, including built-in. And that's literally what you see on TikTok. There's no magic, there's no post-processing. It's a live, actually a meeting. We haven't talked about meetings. It's a live multi-user meeting where one person is holding a phone, looking at the content and talking, usually Michael, and a camera person, often his wife, is holding another phone that's in the same meeting, and they've placed the content in the same spot in the room. So it's just, and his wife or the camera person is just doing a screen capture, and then that's what he posts directly to TikTok.
That is fantastic. It's really exciting.
No magic.
Well, it seems like a magic to just about everybody I show it to. So it's a lot going on there. It's really cool.
I'll say that one of the headset manufacturers builds these really stunning demos. They're just unbelievably beautiful, with sometimes even with data visualization of a wildfire spreading across a landscape, and winds and all these. It's so beautiful, and they spent many months and hundreds of thousands of dollars to create that. Where what Flow does, our real magic, is how easy it is to actually get from your data into something that you can make a TikTok video of. Well, I say it's easy, meaning that when you get your mind around the tool, after it might take a couple of hours, then it's easy. At first, it may seem complex, but at least it's by easy, it can be very quick. And that's just a totally different thing. Having the ability to get ready for the meeting that you have tomorrow and present data in this way is as magical as the end result. It's got to be easy to use.
100%. I think the table synthesizing is easily the biggest wall you guys are breaking right now, because every time someone lines up to do any kind of infographic here, it really is just making sure, checking 4 times over that you got the data just right, and that's after you've input it, and it's just that really is the hump, and this being able to export it to some type of AR example is really just the icing.
let's describe, just as since you bring that up, let me just describe, where we see ourselves in the data pipeline. So if you think about data, the full data pipeline, and I'm just going to wave my hand, so I'll switch to this mode, except I'm a little bit transparent. The sun came up and messed with my lighting here. Anyway, so if you think about the data science pipeline, there's data collection. Somebody's got to go get the data. There's data cleaning. Somebody's got to make sure that it'll make sense. And we don't help you with those two things, right? The next is really data exploration, where you're trying to discover what the data is telling you. Flow has a role there and can do some really interesting things, especially after you've built maybe a set of templates to help you, make your data work well in that environment. Then very often people create, dashboards and do, kind of operational data, which Tableau does very well. We do have some dashboards, but we haven't focused on that as much. Our really sweet spot is this new, I call it the fifth bucket. It's data communication. Once you've got the data, how do you communicate it really effectively to a non-expert audience? And it's beautiful, it's magical, it's got to be meaningful, it needs to stick in the minds of your audience in a way that PowerPoint just doesn't. And that's really where a lot of people are using Flow today. We're starting to get more analysis use cases, and we're excited about that. That tends to be more of our bigger enterprise customers. Any questions on that little description of where we fit in the data pipeline, as I call it? Super. Okay, continuing.
Okay, yes, and it's very clear. I'm very interesting. Thank you so much for your explanation, and it's very clear for us.
Thank you, Manuel. I clicked create new flow, so let's just start from scratch here. The first thing you're going to see is select the template. And I'm going to show this process, but I'm also going to show you how to create swarms and flows without selecting a template, just from scratch, I guess. A template is a great shortcut, and in some ways it's very cool because you can see a whole bunch of really interesting ways that you can use Flow and get ways that you can visualize data quickly here. So I'm just going to grab one of these, one of our pretty straightforward. It's similar to what you've already seen, and it's a 3D categorized 3D chart over time. So simple Flow swarm that you've already seen. It comes automatically with labels. Remember, labels are a component, and an area chart. It actually doesn't have connections. That's interesting. The first thing it does is it shows you what the data was, the underlying data that was used to create this chart, because, right, we can't build a template without some data to show. You can go ahead and just play with it, in real time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this data, and I'm going to drag and drop a CSV file onto here. Now, CSV is a comma separated values file. I'm going to show you that data in just a moment and tell you a little bit more about CSVs. But first, realize that in that data, you have the columns that were used by our template and the new columns that are present in the data I just uploaded. So this remap template data is, we think, pretty cool and innovative. It shows you the original data, some example data from that. It shows you your data that you just uploaded, and it happens to have a date, index, change from January 1st, 2020, and the portfolio allocation. So what we've got here is a stock chart. So you can see S&P 500, 400. You can see Tesla stock going crazy here in 2020. You can even see the dip, the chasm here that happened at the start of the pandemic in the stock market. So that's the data that we just swapped in. And you can, swap these columns pretty quickly. So it says, does this change, percent change is on the height axis? Maybe we want to do the portfolio allocation on the height axis. So how much of each stock is represented in your portfolio? So you can work with your data here in this mini map very quickly. And you can also use it to help you learn flow. So maybe you don't know where to find the height axis. So I click on it. Look at that. It gives me this nice little highlight. Or maybe I don't know yet how to deal with the color. So we'll open up the appropriate spot in the flow so that you, in this user interface, so that you can learn how to work with it, which is kind of nice. Sizes. Right now it's using portfolio allocation to be sizes. So you can see the dots are bigger and smaller based on how big, what a percentage of the, what percentage this particular stock has in total of your portfolio. I can swap it to be, make the dots bigger based on the percent change. And now you can see, of course, Tesla's percent change was much bigger than these others. Just simply shrink these, move them around. Okay, so replace data is an important part of flow, and you can see that it automatically chooses for you. Sometimes it chooses very well. Sometimes you have to do more work with your columnar work here. So that said, now that we've seen how to use a template, I'm going to actually build a little bit more from scratch. I'm going to delete out this swarm and everything associated with it. And I'm going to create a new swarm from scratch. So you can either click on the little plus here, or use the new object button. So I've got a swarm, and it's already telling me, hey, configuration incomplete, kind of handy. But I don't have any, first thing I need to do is start working with the data, right? We're going to build the flow we started with. So you can use Google Sheets, CSV files. You can integrate to databases and use our API. That the API work usually starts to get involved with it, with using our API to bring data into flow with our enterprise customers. But we have a simple method, which we're just about to go live with, which enables you to push data to flow through a simple Python script. And we're working on integrations to a bunch of different data science tools. So that's easy. We're making it much easier to get your data into flow. Flow works with flat tables, like Tableau in that way. It doesn't like to, it doesn't deal with relational databases. It doesn't deal with, JSON or other formats. It's simple tables, kind of similar to Tableau in that regard. So if you are using a CSV file, the first row needs to be the headers of the data. They need to be unique and they can't be blank. And if you try to upload a CSV that has blank, actually has data, but doesn't have a header on that column, flow will say, oh, this isn't a valid CSV file the way we define a CSV file, and you need to fix your data. The way we integrate to Google Sheets is we just copy the URL, paste it in here, and say import. Since I've already given Flow permission to access my Google Sheets, it didn't pop up a dialog to say, hey, do you want to give permission to do this? But that would be a typical step. The first thing we do is we throw the data into space. So here it is. It's a bunch of random dots because we have the chart type on random right now. And each one of those dots is a row in your data set. And let me prove that to you. On rollover, I'm going to have it show me the year, month, temperature anomaly, and I'll just stop there. And now when I start to roll over these, you can see that each one of these dots has data behind it. Obviously, this is not a meaningful view of the world, although it's fun, it's interesting. It's also, it's a place to start. Let me put it that way. Because very often you might want to say, hey, let's tell you what is a dot. And you would start a presentation and say, well, here we've got all this data. Let's go ahead and organize that data. And we're going to add a step. You see the new step appear here. And we're going to start to manipulate the data. So instead of a random, we're going to go to scatter plot. And we are going to select on the width axis, let's go ahead and select the date. On the height axis, let's select the anomaly global temperature. And now you see each dot arranged in time based on the underlying data. We might, well, let's just stop there and show you what happens when we go from step to step. You might lose some of the animation because of my bandwidth. But you see, we start to move the dots from the very beginning of this process. And that's because of brain science. If you think about PowerPoint for a moment, every time you put a PowerPoint slide in front of a user, and then it disappears, your brain actually doesn't know what to do with it. So let's just talk brain science for 30 seconds, because I don't want to distract us too much, but this is part of important aspects of why flow is meaningful in the world, is because we have tried to think through how humans work and how brains work instead of just trying to do something cool with dots in space. So we have a thing called the hippocampus. It's in our brain. It's getting to be more popularized and understood in the public. But the hippocampus does two things for us. It helps us arrange things in space. So it's our spatial memory. It's how a mouse learns to navigate through a maze. That's our hippocampus does that. And it also helps govern our longer term memory, because that mouse, now that they figured out how to get through the maze, needs to remember it in order to find its food again next time. So that spatial awareness is 3D. And when you take a PowerPoint slide and you put it in front of someone's hippocampus and the visual cortex, and it disappears, your brain doesn't know where to put it. It doesn't have any way to organize it in space, and it just forgets it. Your brain just has a really hard time. And you just think about all the PowerPoints you watch, and then you can't remember them at the end of the day or the next day. It's not your fault. It's your brain's fault, and it's PowerPoint's fault. So what we do is we say, don't make things disappear. If we animate from one view to another, then your brain can see the relationships much better and have somewhere to hang its hat. It can hang the information by making a connection to a prior bit of information or a future bit of information. And all of that helps you remember it better and makes your audience be able to build better 3D models and better models of the information. Before I go on, any questions on that whole little diatribe? Okay. You can tell I get excited about this stuff. Obviously, we've been doing this for quite a few years now, and I feel like my whole career has been informing what we're doing. So it is fun to be able to build this and talk about it and share it with you guys. Okay, so now we've got these series of dots, and actually, I kind of made a mistake. I grabbed the wrong data set, so I'm just going to add the step. By wrong, just meaning different than what I was planning. So I'm going to create a blank step, and I'm going to do this again. I'm going to create a new swarm, grab a different data set, and this time I'm going to upload a CSV file. And this is just a simpler data set. This is just annual temperatures instead of monthly. Let's go ahead and organize this. So I say select scatter plot. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that whenever fields are missing, if our system doesn't have enough information to accomplish its task, it's going to make it red, and it's going to give you this configuration incomplete little highlight here, which is actually a button. I click on it. Oh, this is what I have to go fix. Kind of happy with this. This has only been in the product about a week, and we think it's really quite handy. On the width, I'm going to do the year, and on the height, I'm going to do the temperature anomaly. This is the first visualization we're looking at earlier today. And it has two categories, either land or sea. But this doesn't look like the same as what we built. So let's go ahead and keep working that. Let's go ahead and work with the colors a little bit. So let's add a palette. What we're going to do is we're going to arrange the dots based on, or arrange the colors based on the underlying data, in this case, the temperature anomaly data. You can pick which attribute. I'm going to, we can click and select a bunch of default palettes. But for this one, I'm just going to manipulate this palette directly. So first of all, I want my cold temperatures to be blue. I know you probably can't see my little color pop-up window there, but I just selected a blue color and it knows that I'm creating a new palette. So it pops up and says, hey, you better name this blue and red. So now I didn't quite get the blue I wanted. Let's try again. Okay. So the lower dots are blue, colder dots are blue, and the warmer dots are red. Because I don't have that much data here, just for the moment, I'm going to up the size of the dots a little bit. There we go. You can see it more obviously. Let's go ahead and do some more work on these dots to make them clear, especially which ones are in front of the others. And we do that, remember, with a component. Let's use a connection. The simplest way for a connection to work is we're going to connect the dots when the column values match the column land or sea. So if a dot has land, it will connect it to other dots that have land. So if the data has a property set to land, it'll connect all the other dots with that same property, and same thing with sea. So that starts to look like the structure we saw before. Let's go ahead and add an area chart. Same thing, I'm going to connect the dots when the columns match land or sea. And we now have the area chart that drops down. Maybe we'll just keep going here. As long as we're talking about components, let's create some labels. So let's add the year and temperature anomaly. Oh my goodness, that's lots of labels. That's probably not exactly what we want, right? But first of all, just to be clear, see, this labels is a component of the swarm. We can hide and show it here. But what we probably want to do is introduce some logic to say, when are we going to show this label? And that's done right here. So we're going to add a condition. Now you'll notice that our logical conditions throughout the app don't expect you to be a data scientist. They expect you to be a human. And in our case, actually understand logical expressions in human language. So I'm going to show these labels when the value of column maybe year is the maximum for the category land and sea. What it did is it just showed us the label at the highest point. Looks like the label is down. Oh, it's centered. Okay, so that actually put this thing. So it's going to show when the value of the column year is the maximum. Well, 2022 is the maximum, is the largest number in the year column. Maybe we want to show the maximum for the temperature. So now we're going to show the high point. And we can add another condition. We can show when the value of the temperature anomaly is the minimum for category land and sea. And we need to do an or. And now we're showing the lowest data point, 1909, and the highest data point, 2020. Let's go ahead and just, obviously, there are simple things, like changing the size of the font and changing the color that you'll get used to as well. But you can see this kind of logical structures, you'll see that in our filtering and throughout the app. Hopefully it looks like a lot of pull downs, but it's actually really powerful in order to take a whole bunch of data and not just end up with labels on every single point. And then what do? It just gets complicated real quick. I'm going to pause there and see if you have questions kind of about anything we've talked about up to this point, but particularly the logic or connections or labels, those kinds of things. Okay, moving on. So now that we've got this, I'm going to go ahead and you'll notice that the data actually has a 0 point, and it has, you know, some information around the axes. So I'm going to talk about the axes for just a moment. So the axes are here under axis options. By the way, you can click this and collapse all the other sections and only look at the thing you're interested in. One of the first things it can do is set the axis origin to 0, which for this particular data makes a lot of sense. Just to keep it simple, I'm going to drop it back down here. This is a lot of options, but it really lets you have total control over your axes. So maybe for a temperature anomaly C, you want to say something else. So on the height axis, maybe I just say difference from normal. And yes, I can type and talk at the same time. But right away, you can see the change up here in the label on this. You can decide whether you even want to show an axis or not by turning it off. So that's showing it is separate than having it. You can determine whether you have grids. By default, we have these reactive grids. See this side over here? It pops back and forth between the sides, same thing, the top and bottom, based on the angle you're looking at. Maybe you want to just turn that off. So you want static grids, so it no longer pops around, or maybe you want to just have no grids. And now you've just got the axes themselves without the grid. And you also have control over the labels. I'm not going to go into all of this. You know, it's pretty obvious, I guess, offsets, but just remember you can turn on and off the axis labels and the tick labels. So on the width here, see, I'm turning on and off whether the tick labels actually appear or not. Whole bunch of options in there to get used to and learn, and that can be its own set. So let's see, let's just walk through what we've got, what are the different aspects of the swarm, and then we're going to start to finish up and just, you know, take questions for the rest. So remember, we've got components, we've got data, and managing the data can either be done here or with the manage data pop-up. Remember, it shows you all the data that's used in this flow, in this particular one. You've got perspectives. We did not talk about perspectives, but just to show you, right now, this is a default perspective. See all the random dots? When we go forward, it automatically created perspective 1. So it's the same swarm, but it's got multiple perspectives. So you can actually swap it in and out on any particular step. A little bit more of an advanced feature. It works on its own without you having to think about it, but it's nice to know that it's there. There's the chart. We have a number of chart types. We've really only talked about scatterplot today, scatterplot and random, and we can go into more in another thing, another meeting where you talk about maps and some of our newer functionality. We have force-directed graphs if you're into network graphs. We have not talked about additional dimensions, kind of an advanced thing that is, well, what's a quick way I can describe this? Additional dimensions is a way to deal with the fact that sometimes your dots appear at the same point in space. And when that happens, you might want to create little clusters of information. You might want to build, you know, bar charts or other little ways to move the dots in another dimension than just the ones that are already described by your scatter plot. I know that didn't make total sense, but we'll have to keep it simple for today. You have the sizes of the dots. You've already seen that we can scale the sizes based on values, or you can just do a fixed value. Colors, we didn't talk about too much, but you can have a fixed versus a gradient. The one we showed in before was a palette. We've got filters. Do a quick view here. So I want to only show the data when the year is greater than 1950. And you see that it changed the scale here to 1950. Hide filtered categories. If I just click it and unclick it, you get a sense of what it does. I know I'm moving a little fast here at the end, but this is more of an overview. Interactions, you notice that we did some rollovers, and there's a bunch of other kinds of interactions that you can do. We talked about axis options. When you have these pop-ups, you can change how they're viewed. And there's a little bit of control over animation and dot shape and position. I guess we should mention position. You can move these things left and right, up and down. You can, rotate them on their axes. And that occurs per step. So that is the quick overview of what you can do with a swarm and how that works. So with that, hopefully you've seen that we could start from scratch, either using templates or using building things from just swarms and objects, see how we can get things in space. We didn't build the most complex, exciting, interesting visualizations, just pretty much stuck to line charts and scatter plots, but that's a great place to start. And that's really where a lot of the value, even on these straightforward visualizations, comes from with Flow. I'm going to stop there and just take questions and go anywhere you guys would like to go with the rest of our time.
This is great. My first question, because I think it's just toying with it, I'll find this out. But if you were to, during your narration, you wanted to point to each axis, you wanted to draw attention to what axes you're using, would you just make, 2 or 3 different steps to allow the animations to take time to get there? Or would that just be some way of hiding the data would that be contained in the same step if you were trying to, walk people through each
It's a
axis?
great question. And
sure.
It's a great question. The answer is both. So it depends on how you expect to work it. If you're going to record the narration as part of a story, today, yes, you would need to create a separate step for each one of those. And even with a filtration process, so say I'm at a step, duplicate means take that same thing. I would go ahead and say, hey, on this second step, I want to highlight what's been happening in these last few years, so year greater than 2000. So now that is actually a separate perspective. And when you advance the next step, you can see that I just zoomed into the years after 2020.
We can't see.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I see you.
Oh, okay. What I did is, here, let me just redo it. I'm going to delete out the step I just created because I'm going to recreate it. Okay, so I'm on this step, and you know that in your narration you want to focus on some particular aspect of it. Now, this is the narration that you would include when you create a story. If you're showing it live and recording a video, you can point and talk to anything you'd like, including highlight different aspects of the data. But if you're using Flow to create a series of steps with narration built in, we don't record all your mouse clicks yet. It's in development, actually, because we think that it would be helpful. But so I've got step 1, going to add a step. Duplicate means keep the same thing, and I want to focus in. I did click on that swarm in order to bring it up to the right-hand side. Sometimes I should move a little slower. And on the filter, I'm going to show data greater than 2000. And now I've actually built that step. So if I go back to step 3, it shows the full thing, move forward, and it animates to show just the last few years. So that is one way to do it, is you want to emphasize a certain aspect of the data. Another is, if you're recording yourself live, there's a bunch of ways you can highlight data in real time. So right now, I'm going to I said highlight when the category is year. So maybe I want to compare these 2 years, right? So it highlights the category wherever the year matches highlights. Or maybe I want to highlight either land or sea. So now when I click, it's going to match all of the sea options. So there's a variety of ways you can set it to filter, to highlight the data, or even isolate it. So for example, maybe I want to only, not only do I want to highlight it, but I want to filter to only show land. So I set it to on double click, this, hide everything else. And it's set to click. When you click an empty space, it brings it back. So there's a variety of ways you can highlight and isolate in real time. But, well, actually, even those do get saved per step. So now that I've highlighted that step, let's see if this works. I'm going to go forward, and it's going to show me not only the filter, but also pre-highlight C, just because when I left the step, it was in that state. There's a lot more to describe there, but I think you start to see the power of being able to focus your user's attention really well on the thing that matters, so that you can really tell a good story. More questions?
Oh, I was looking for the app on the Android Play Store here. What is that called specifically?
There is no app on the Android Play Store. It's a browser.
Oh, so I'm going through my Chrome browser to Flow Immersive and pulling that up. Okay.
You can go to flowimmersive.com, where actually all of this, our actual app is at a.flow.gl. In fact, here, just to be clear, I'm going to share this with everybody, and I'm going to share a public link, and you can point your phone to this URL. It'll grab it from a browser, and you can actually see it live in a moment. We are working on an app, a native app for Meta, or actually a native app specifically for the Oculus devices, eventually get onto other devices. So we love WebXR. We are really committed to that, but there's also some things that we want to take advantage directly on headsets moving forward. If you're not familiar with our headset, how this looks in VR, AR, using these kinds of things, just know that it's not necessary. You do not need to look at any of this in headset. It's very cool if you do. But we long ago learned that having headsets be a requirement to be successful in the world was not necessarily a good idea. So it's not required, but it is a really dramatic and exciting way to look at your data if you do want to look at that. And it's the same thing. You go to the Oculus browser, you type in our URL, and you can go ahead and select your flows directly from there. Joe, will we get accounts? Yes. So it's actually a.flow.gl, and let me just share my screen to show you how to get started if you have not yet done so. Pick this. So when you first come to on flowimmersive.com, there's a link on there, but basically go to a.flow.gl and if I log out here, you'll see that there's a register button. It will register, and it will also ask you for a subscription, which is free. Zoom told me it just, so am I still here? I think I'm still here. Do you hear me?
Yep.
I can hear you.
Yes, we can
Okay.
hear you, Jason.
I don't know why Zoom. Okay, so you can go here to a.flow.gl and register. You can go when you click to subscribe.
Oh, wow.
Okay, there, it actually did crash.
Yeah, you went away
Yeah.
for 10 seconds.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay, what I'm trying to say is you can register and you do not need to put in a credit card for a free trial. So you've got 30 days, probably going to turn that into 2 weeks, where you can experiment and have full functionality in the app for that period. If you want to experiment longer, before putting in a credit card, just get in touch with us. If you're an enterprise or want to use this professionally, please just get in touch. If you have questions about anything, please just get in touch. We are here. Bill, who's joined the call a little bit late, everybody, Bill Morton is our VP of Services and does a lot of our one-on-one training. So really, just get in touch with us. We will help you any way we can, and we want to learn from you every day. If you get confused with the editor, we need to know so that we can make it better. But don't hesitate. I'm going to say it about 20 more times. Don't hesitate to get in touch. We're learning every day, and the only way we can do that is to learn from you guys. Bill's email is bill@flow.gl. My email is jason@flow.gl. And I'm just so glad that everybody here is engaged and willing to spend this perfectly good hour with us this morning.
This is great, Jason. Thanks so much for walking it through.
Sure. CJ, this was awesome. Thanks for your time. Do you have any flow examples currently built using IoT data, real-time IoT data? I have to admit that we have not focused on real-time data as much as yet. But
that's what I figured you were going to say.
We will get there.
Cool. No, this was awesome.
Super. Yeah. And if you've, get in touch if you'd like to talk about a more specific use case, and how we get from here to there is really important.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jason.
Joe asks, is the data secured in any way, or is Flow available for everyone for testing purposes? The data is absolutely secured. Okay. We are hosted on AWS. We have gone through full security audits with organizations like Deloitte. So we know that it's, not only do we know, but our customers know that it's secured. It is a multi-tenant architecture, meaning that we have a single database where we store the data. So it's logically separated, so no one else can get at it other than you with your passwords, under a password. And when you share a flow, you can share it in an unlisted way, kind of like unlisted YouTube, where no one can find it unless they have the URL. You can share it privately, where no one can find it no one can get at it unless they log in. And you can create an organization, an enterprise organization, which makes it easier to share, so you don't have to type in everybody's emails every time you want to share within your organization. And then you can publish it for public discovery, make it truly public. So it's secure on those ways. And fourth, especially if you're like a financial services institution and you talk to us about enterprise engagement, we can do on-prem installations, either entirely your own AWS installation, or on Microsoft Azure, or if you want to use your own Unix boxes. Obviously, that's a part of a larger engagement. Howard says, first of all, did that answer your question in terms of security, Joe? Howard says, this is amazing. Thank you. Only feedback is the create story feature is buggy. Is there a way to output to video? I'm sorry that there's some bugs. We're working on them. And if you'd like to give us some more feedback on what you're experiencing there, that would be great. So ping me with specific examples that you're finding buggy wise. Is there a way to output video? The way to output video at this point is to use a screen capture tool and just grab the screen, whether you're on desktop or on a phone or in headset. Raz, have to hop. Thank you, Joe. Perfect. Thank you. Manuel, thank you. Joe, excited to test this out. Right. Okay. Howard. Okay. Thank you, guys. I'm going to let you go. Been a great audience.
Thanks again, Jason.
See you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, Bill.